Are we streaming now?
We are live now.
Thank you. All right, welcome everyone to House Judiciary. Today we'll be discussing House Bill 85. We'll take testimony from agencies first, and then we will go to public comment. We'll begin with taking the roll. Carol?
Representative Crago.
Here.
Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Oakley.
Here.
Representative Provenza.
Here.
Representative Rodriguez Williams.
Here.
Vice Chair Washut.
Here.
Representative Yin.
Here.
Representative Zwanesser.
Here. Here.
Chairman Olson.
Excused. All right, Representative Oakley, your bill, please present it to the committee. Please state your name and district for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Amber Oakley, representative for House District 55. And today I present to you House Bill 85. So I brought this bill as an effort to do what I thought or what I perceived, and I think many people would perceive as a hole in the law. Perhaps considered by prosecutors as unintentional by the legislature, but of course, in the law, that is never presumed. So it is presumed that it was intentionally left out. So what I'll do, I put some, I won't belabor it, but I put some cases in front of you, and the first one, it's file stamped, it's 2005. And a district court judge of ours dismissed a case. So you can see the legal reasoning in that. But basically, it comes to the conclusion of what I just said, that the judge found this is not prohibited behavior according to the legislature, and that if the legislature wants to prescribe such behavior, they can do so. So that's why I'm here. I think that this is behavior that should be prescribed in the law. So on this case, for example, what happened was the woman was on probation for methamphetamine abuse of some sort. I believe it was a misdemeanor. But through that, law enforcement found, got word that she was actively under the influence. They, pursuant to that, took blood and urine and found both the mother and the child to be positive for methamphetamine. So charges were brought again. So clearly many people thought that this was already illegal behavior. And again, so through this decision said, no, the legislature did not intend that. And if they do, they have to bring it specifically. Again, so that's why we're here. Interestingly, when you read that case, there really is some quite lengthy history with this in many different states, even including the history of this in Wyoming. But that being said, I don't think it's been interesting going through this process. Some of the pushback, some of the arguments, but that's a good thing. That's what we're here to do before we pass laws and decide policy. But in no way is this a stretch or a big change in the law. It's illegal to possess methamphetamine. It's illegal to use methamphetamine. It's illegal to have children in the same room or vehicle or anywhere near methamphetamine. And so this, this fits squarely in with behavior that is already prohibited and illegal. And then on top of that, of course, as a policy discussion, this is arguably of those named, of all the different ways that it's prohibited to use and be around. methamphetamine, this is arguably the most dangerous behavior of all of those. And I believe that there's broad support in our communities, among law enforcement and among the people of Wyoming, that indeed this should be illegal, proscribed behavior. So with that, I'm going to talk about a couple of things. I mentioned the pushback and some of the discussion, had some good discussion. But so I'll specifically address some of those concerns. One, this discussion of, we need to give care and support, not incarceration. That is, in my belief, that is exactly what this is a measure to do. That is very, very often, more often than not, what the criminal justice system is used to do. Like it or not, that's what happens. And in discussions, actually, I think I have a good way to prove that that's exactly the case, because I talked about all those different ways that methamphetamine is illegal. And I can't think of any of those where the person didn't receive probation. It is so common. It's in our laws. It's actually said, like on DUIs, you have to go get a substance abuse evaluation. This is the common practice. After you're convicted, you're going to get a substance abuse evaluation. You're going to follow the mandates required in that, but it has the extra, it has the stick and the carrot that you will do these things. We'll give you support, but you will be subject to UAs. We will make sure that you are following. Yes, that's exactly what should be done. Make sure that there is follow through, because if not, the danger is significant. So it is not an attempt to incarcerate these mothers, but it is an insistence that they will get it right. Again, the record shows over and over and over that with all of these types of crimes, they do get probation, they do get services, and that would be the intent clearly here with this crime. And that way ensuring both the safety of the mother and of the child. Two, so some discussion, I didn't even go over the bill, but it's literally a paragraph. So I'm sure you're all aware. But I do, I guess, want to say, so looking at subsection C, this is what it would add. It specifically says that, while pregnant, they cannot knowingly consume methamphetamine or a Schedule 1 or 2 drug that is a narcotic. A narcotic drug is defined in our statutes under 35(7)1002(15), which I can provide to you, but the point being, it is, let me see, opium, opiate, any salt compound, isomer, which is a chemically equivalent or identical to alkalides of opium poppy and poppy straw, or coca leaves, and any salt. Anyway, so it's defined. There's A through D. Marijuana does not fall within any of those drugs. Marijuana is not a narcotic drug. I know there's been some concern about that. This specifically is methamphetamine and Schedule 1 and 2 drugs that are narcotics. So we can put that one to rest. And I felt like there was another. Oh, the third one. I've heard about a possible burden on probation and parole. I also likewise reject that. I think either way you go, I reject that argument, because one, as I'm looking at the cases that have been dismissed in the jurisdiction I've dealt with, it's been 2. I don't expect it to be something where there is like 100 new cases. But again, if that argument cuts both ways, because if we did get 100 new cases, then we need to prioritize this over the misdemeanors. If something were to happen, that there was a deluge of these, then I think we've identified a problem, and it needs to be prioritized. For example, in Fremont County, there are these are the numbers: 187 people on felony probation, 140 on misdemeanor, and 40 on parole. So that would mean this could be prioritized, the resources up there with the felony and and should be. This is a dangerous practice, and we need to get it right for our community. So with that, it's been an interesting process and conversation, and I appreciate all that. But I consider it pretty basic that we would have this as prohibited behavior in the state of Wyoming. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Representative Oakley. Committee questions for Representative? Representative Yan.
Thank you, Vice Chairman, Mr. Chairman. Representative Oakley. So, I think one of the things that we always consider when we introduce new crimes is maybe what the effect on society would be. Do you think that this would incentivize a pregnant person to get an abortion to avoid getting a felony? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Oakley.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Representative Yin. I personally don't believe so at all. Have I heard that as an argument? Yes, I don't see any I was going to say statistics, data to back it up, but I mean, I don't even think it seems to make sense with what we're talking about. If a woman is actively using and abusing methamphetamine when they're pregnant, I don't think they're likely to be the ones proactively going out of the state of Wyoming to get, which is what you would have to do to get an abortion. So I reject that as far as thinking that there would be any connection personally. I guess, again, that's part of the policy discussion, certainly, Representative.
Follow up, Representative Yan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I mean, I guess the situation I'm thinking of is that someone is an existing methamphetamine user. They know that they're a methamphetamine user, of course, and then they find out that they're pregnant. And then I guess that would be the situation I'm thinking of. So they find out that they're pregnant. They know that they're already a meth user. Would they then decide, would that go into their calculus of deciding whether or not they get an abortion if there's a chance that they go to jail?
Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Yin, I again find it an incredible idea that this person who's already actively using an illegal substance, there's not one person that is not aware that methamphetamine is prohibited. So that person would already be going in actively, like if you're talking about going to deliver the baby, they're already going to have to present themselves as doing something obviously that's illegal. The idea that somehow they're going to know, oh, but now the legislature enhanced that. Perhaps instead of the misdemeanor, I could be charged with the felony. No, I don't think that level of sophistication on a decision-making that, oh, it might be a misdemeanor if I go in now, but the difference between a felony, now I'll make this decision. No, I personally do not believe that would be a credible reason or belief that that's going to be the decision-making for a woman. So again, I reject that as far as my weighing into this policy decision.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have concerns that this will keep pregnant women from getting prenatal care or the other things that they need during pregnancy up to birth. And so if there's the fear of criminalization or having your child taken from you, then are they going to seek prenatal care where they're concerned that maybe they're going to be turned in? Are they going to be willing to ask for substance abuse treatment if they're concerned that they're going to be punished? I mean, have you heard what are your thoughts on if this does impede on medical care? Is it still beneficial? Does it still help the state of Wyoming?
Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Provenza. Certainly, this is all part of the discussion, but I think maybe some really important points. Being that this is a very narrow, limited, it's a criminal statute. that does not weigh into the mandatory reporting, or there's not a mandatory reporting, if you will, included in this bill. So a large part of what you said is already the practice that DFS or medical providers would take, which, to be honest, I don't know. But this doesn't require them to report to law enforcement. So when you said if they're worried about their child being taken from them, I mean, clearly, and maybe some medical providers could speak to it, but they probably do report to DFS when they see that a child is born and is positive for methamphetamine. At least I hope they do. If that's not already happening, then we're in trouble and we need this statute more than ever. But I do believe that all of that is already in place, that there is, the Department of Family Services can and does give help and support. But yes, if your child, if you're going to actively continue to use methamphetamine, a repercussion could be your child being taken away from you. I consider that a good thing personally. But nonetheless, that's not what this statute is. Those are the practices of DFS and the medical community that are currently in place and are not addressed here.
Further questions? Representative Wanser.
Thanks. Prosecution question, I guess. Someone who's 2 or 3 months pregnant arguably might not know, meth user arrested, any number of reasons why, do the toxicology, find out, hey, by the way, you're also pregnant. By not knowing you're pregnant, would you be able to be exempted? Or do you automatically, instead of having your strong misdemeanor or low-level felony, you're now eligible for a 5-year felony, even if you would argue maybe legitimately you didn't know you were pregnant?
Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Zwanitzer. That's a good question. Something we discussed clearly, that it has the knowingly consume methamphetamine. The question there would be whether, yes, and it was, I mean, and it has been discussed. To be honest, my thoughts on that were that I have yet to see, that doesn't mean, but where the per se would get in trouble as far as not being knowingly, because that's how this has come to law enforcement's attention, has, in the cases that we've looked at, have been a child that was born. So not via, testing somebody, because arguably, if the woman doesn't know she's pregnant, I'm not sure how the state would. So, so the per se nature of it didn't bother me. Again, that's for discussion.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Agency personnel, anybody from the agencies wishing to testify? Come on up. Identify yourself and the agency for the record. And
Thank you,
give
Mr.
us your
Chairman.
testimony.
Members of the committee, Stephen Johansson with the Wyoming Department of Health. I'll keep my comments very brief. The Department of Health doesn't have a position on this bill. And in fact, legally or operationally, we're not really involved or implicated in a statute like this. Just to comment to some of the discussion earlier, that we certainly have some concern when there's incentives for individuals, pregnant women in this case, to not seek substance use disorder treatment if they were pregnant, because there might be that disincentive there because of a punitive measure. We have, when we saw this bill get filed and introduced, started to prepare some initial data, both in our community mental health and substance abuse programs, as well as our Medicaid program. If the committee is interested, or should it be needed, that we can provide just for summary statistics on maybe how many individuals this could impact. That data, the analysis doesn't point you in one direction or the other on the policy decision, which I know you're debating today, but it could provide some volume, some figures of who those clients might be that could be impacted or that would be in a given year impacted by a statute like this. But Mr. Chairman, very general comments from the Department of Health, certainly from a treatment and a public health standpoint, but happy to stand for any questions that the committee might have.
Committee questions for Mr. Johansson? Seeing none, thank you. Good afternoon. Please state your name and agency for the record and let us know what you want to tell us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Corin Schmidt, and I'm the Director of the Department of Family Services. And in addition to the Department of Health, we also don't have a completely material interaction with this legislation, other than there will be times when children, siblings of the mother or siblings of the unborn child will come into protective custody as a result of maybe possible incarceration of the mom if there is no probation. If there is probation, and I'm glad to hear Representative Oakley's explanation, especially with this legislation not including marijuana, because I think with the inclusion of marijuana, we would see much larger numbers coming into care. We also, though, have a program that I think is important to note, and so this may be a shameless plug, but I think it is relevant here, that we're, per federal law and some funding that we receive, we are working with a multidisciplinary team around plans of safe care. And what a plan of safe care is it's just as it sounds. If there's been a mother who is using that has been identified by medical professionals or otherwise, we can work with that mother to get a plan of care in place in the hopes of accessing treatment and then also having a baby that's born not addicted. That is also available for families whose babies are born with substance use. So it's something that would start at the hospital. It would trigger a plan of safe care conversation. Some states require that DFS be automatically notified if there is a substance exposed child born, and that a referral, an immediate referral to DFS. Some states do not do that. So to go to Representative Oakley's question about what happens and does DFS know? No, we don't always know. It's up to the medical professionals as to what they're going to do. And then if they make a decision to take protective custody, or if they call law enforcement and ask them to take protective custody, then we'll get called.
Questions for Ms. Schmidt? Representative Rodriguez-Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Mrs. Schmidt, I'm curious if you know whether or not there's other existing state laws in other states that are similar to the one that we're proposing today, to the draft bill, that do include marijuana. And the reason for my question is because I know in states that have legalized marijuana, they're well aware of the different types of form and the high level of potency that Schedule I drug contains. And so I know there's an increase in accidental pediatric exposure in pregnant moms that are trying to breastfeed. There's an impact on hospitals in the OBGYN department when it comes to deliveries and so forth. And so I'm just curious if you know of any impact that other state DFS agencies incur on this.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Rodriguez-Williams, no, I don't have any information about the impact of marijuana use on pregnant moms and then its association with the child welfare system. As we have done some research around this particular topic, I didn't see anything specific come up for that, but certainly we can dig a little bit more. It's a little bit about the difference between a criminal statute and a child welfare statute. And what this is really talking about is a criminal statute. So the Child Welfare Agency may or may not be involved with these cases. It really depends if there's children in the home and if there's at risk of those children being abused and neglected, or if for some other reason that mom comes to our attention through the child welfare side and then we get involved. So it's a little tough to say about this particular law, this type of criminal law's effect on other child welfare systems in other states.
Further questions? Director Schmidt, do you have a preference one way or the other, or maybe you could explain the pros and cons of mandatory reporting in a situation like this?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a good question. And the conversation really bore out when the Senate file was up in committee hearings earlier this week. I think it's a long week. And I would defer to certainly the medical society or the medical community to be able to respond to that a little bit more eloquently. But essentially a mandatory reporting requirement as applied to mental health therapists, substance abuse counselors, and medical professionals, what they, I think, would say is it has a very chilling effect on the relationship, the patient clinician relationship, that if a woman divulges that she's been using and is pregnant, and then that is a requirement of a report to DFS, I think you would really see diminished participation in the medical community or accessing healthcare as a result. I've not looked at the data. I know that some states have had those conversations. I don't know what that would look like for us.
Thank you. Any further questions? Representative Provenza?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Schmidt, are you familiar with any research on what the impact is of maybe removing children from their home in, say, a situation like this where we could be trying to rehabilitate mom? And I mean, what's in the best interest of the child is, I guess, sometimes it might be in the very best interest, but if we're removing kids in some of these instances where we could maybe rehabilitate behavior, is that detrimental to long-term outcomes?
Director Schmidt?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Provenza, that really is getting into a philosophical debate about child welfare. What we are required per federal regulation to do is to try to reunify. That is how we have to look at our work in terms of what the federal government says. This is what we're setting as child welfare policy. Reunification is if the child can be safe is really what we want. And then if reunification isn't safe, then placement in some sort of home setting. So when we talk about reunification, we are always looking at the welfare of the mom, the welfare of the children, and what are the services that mom or family need to have so that they can safely take care of their children. Certainly, as a whole, the outcomes for children who are raised in foster care are not great. And I think that goes to then why it is that we think it's really important to try to get services to mom and families first, so that removal is really the last choice.
All right. Thank you, Director. Any other agency personnel wishing to testify? Good afternoon, Director. State your name and agency for the record, and then tell us what we need to know.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Dan Shannon. I'm with the Wyoming Department of Corrections. I just had a few comments and I would stand for questions. It's mainly my reason for being here today. I've been asked several times this week regarding the mother-daughter program at the Wyoming Women's Center located in Lusk. That program is not up and running because of staffing issues. With that being said, I've been asked what impact, if this bill became legislation, would have. And I don't really believe that would have much impact on it if the program was running. Here's my reasoning. First and foremost, I think most cases, the child would be born prior to incarceration. And if that was not the case, there would not be a reunification with the child being the victim. And number two, until the mother addressed her substance abuse. So As far as reunification, the program will not allow a child to be there more than 18 months because studies have shown that the children start to become institutionalized after 18 months. So I don't really see a concern with that. Representative Oakley comments about as far as you may overwhelm the probation parole agents, things of that nature. Corrections is on the receiving end of any form of legislation, criminal legislation, and we'll take care of business. I don't really have a concern as far as probation parole or the numbers. We'll readjust our resources to make it work. Mr. Chairman, that's my comments, and I stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Director. Questions? Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director Shannon. Just in regards to the ITU program, when do you anticipate that getting up and running in Lusk?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Oakley, the ITU program is up and running. We currently have a capacity at 56, and I also, by July 1st of this year, I'm going to extend another 64 individuals at our Wyoming Honor Conservation Camp.
Thank you, Director. Representative Oakley, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, I think I must have misheard then. What did you say that your first comments? You said you've been asked about this week and it's not running because of staffing. I thought you were referring to the ITU and the women's unit, so clearly I misunderstood.
About the mother-daughter program, Director Shannon.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Oakley, that's correct. It's the mother-daughter program.
Representative Oakley, something further? No, others? Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Notice a couple of legislators in the room. Are either of you wishing to testify on this bill? Representative Clifford. LeBeau, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Please state your name and district and then tell us what you'd like to tell us.
My name is Coming Woman, English name, Andy LeBeau, and I represent District 33, Ninahawut. I'm a politician in my Rapo language. I come here to honor and represent the sovereign tribes of the Eastern Shoshone Northern Rapo tribes. And wholeheartedly, we support ensuring our families, our communities in a good way. And with this particular legislation, we just really feel, speaking to the members of who I represent, is the stick is not going to help our people. We really need programs that work, programs that rehabilitate, that keep the families together in the best way that's possible. And so, I particularly stand opposed to this legislation. I really don't think it's going to get to the root problem of what we're trying to solve here. And that's the addiction, and particularly in my communities, substance abuse and drug abuse. There is high incidences, unfortunately. And so we're doing our best to deal with programs that could help our mothers stay in the home. In particularly, they have other kids, and to keep them together. But we need help. We need help. We need mental health help. We need substance abuse help. And I think we just need to do a better job of collaborating with programs, whether that's on the reservation or particularly with our bordering towns that border the reservation. And I think we need to do a better job before we pass this kind of legislation. And thanks, committee, and I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Representative LeBeau? Thank you very much. Come forward. Representative, state your name and your district for the record, and then tell us what you want us to know.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Romero Martinez, House District 44. And I support this bill. I do want to say that I don't have a magic solution to any of these problems. I just want to give one situation, and I know of more than one in my district, which is very impoverished, where this has happened. Even though I can name names, I'm not going to name the name because the result of this pregnancy ended in death. And the funeral was by toilet bowl. Okay, so I've supported this initiative. I do want to make a friendly suggestion because I don't have an amendment at this time. But I think we should support this bill. And if we need to make an amendment that is more amiable towards treatment, then let's do that. But let's not let death by addiction and funeral by toilet bowl continue to be a practice in my neighborhood. Thank you.
Questions for the Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, would you support this legislation if it increased neonatal abstinence syndrome or other adverse effects to infants?
If it supported neonatal,
So would you support this legislation if the outcome of bringing policies such as this bill resulted in an increase in infant, basically drug withdrawal or other adverse health effects because of the legislation?
Representative.
if that's what it did, I would not. So therefore, this is why I'm thinking I'm making a suggestion since I don't have the actual amendment language. I'm trying to talk to all the stakeholders, and it looks like there's a gap in there that we could work with. I think the big reason I support this bill right now is it's a first step. I don't like taking first steps. Yesterday, I didn't like taking a first step, so I ended up voting no because I'm an all or nothing person. But I do understand that we do need to fix that part that you're mentioning. And thank you for the question.
Further questions? Thank you very much. Who else would like to testify on the bill? This is a matter of procedure for those in the community that are going to testify. Just state your name, who you represent, if you represent yourself or some organization, and then all question and answers come through the chair. So please state your name, agents or organization for the record, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Cheryl Foland, and I am the legislative advocate for the Wyoming Association of Addictions Professionals. And I'm also in private practice. I'm an LCSW in Rollins. And thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My association is definitely in opposition to this bill in its current form. We would very much encourage the committee to entertain an interim topic so that all the stakeholders can be brought to the table to discuss more than just the criminal charges and making substance use from pregnant women a crime, that we look at the bigger picture. We have, and this is just a small set of studies, but we do have studies now that suggest that women who find themselves pregnant and are using substances are less likely to seek out prenatal care. They are less likely to seek out substance abuse treatment for more than just the reason of the addiction, but because of their shame, their guilt, their views about themselves. They may not have family support. And all of those things are important to the success of the rehabilitation of a mother. We certainly do see the intentions for consequences But criminalizing a pregnant woman and her mental health and substance abuse issues, we believe is not the way to help our families, our community members, our neighbors in Wyoming. We do believe that treatment should be first and foremost. Unfortunately, in our statutes, we do not have a statute for treatment in lieu of incarceration, as many states do. And we believe that something like that should definitely be discussed and bring good legislation that will help and not hinder the infants, the children, the families, and especially the mother who has substance abuse and mental health issues. Thank you, and I stand for any questions.
Questions? Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony and being here. We keep having this kind of is just a back and forth, saying the woman needs care and support, which I think we can all agree with. So my question, though, is in the face of when they continue to use and abuse, then what do you do?
Mr. Chair.
In protection of the child specifically.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, Representative Oakley. Again, we encourage treatment. Treatment is not a one-time, we're done. Treatment is across the lifespan of someone who is using. And to be able to help that infant grow and succeed and become viable, that woman needs support from her doctor, support from a mental health professional, support from a substance abuse professional. There are medications, especially for opioids, that can be used to help a woman throughout her pregnancy that are safe. And I will defer to my medical colleagues to be able to discuss more about that. But we are seeing a lot of success in those situations and reducing the number of deaths and the number of prenatal or perinatal complications upon birth. And again, I would defer to my medical and nursing colleagues to be able to provide you that information.
All right, anybody, Representative Craigle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Folden, thank you for being here. So I have a couple of questions. First one being, when the support that you're talking about, that you're describing doesn't work, what options are left? How do we fix that problem if the support you're describing does not work?
Ms. Sol.
Mr. Chair, Representative Craigo, that's the $56 million question. We don't have a magic wand. The way that we see the criminal statutes being written, most of these children are going to be born while the mother is in jail, as Director Shannon had stated. And then we have another complexity. I believe, in my experience, and I've been doing this for 20 years, the more support, the more likely and the more interventions that we can put in place, the more likely the success to be. Is it 100%? No, I wish it could be, but we do know that it's not. And sometimes incarceration is a therapeutic tool. I don't know that that's always the answer, but it's certainly, I wouldn't say which should be the first.
Representative Craigle, follow up.
We've talked a lot about reporting, mandatory versus not mandatory. Do you have any statistics from your group, your members that you represent? What do you know if they report to law enforcement? If a pregnant woman walks into their office, are they going to call and report that to law enforcement right then and there?
Ms. Sol.
Mr. Chair, Representative Craigo, currently they would not, is my understanding from my membership. Mandatory reporting in this situation puts us, mental health and substance abuse professionals, in a very, very difficult position. because of our ethical responsibilities to help these people and making it mandatory report to bring law enforcement to the table, we compromise that relationship and being able to assist them. There is a study that came out in 2020 from authors Paris, Harriet Maru, Hacking, and Sommer. And the title of their study is Secrecy versus Disclosure. Women with substance use disorders share experiences and help seeking during pregnancy. And through every woman that was interviewed in this study, all of them said the same thing. If they knew that their doctor or their mental health provider or substance abuse provider was going to report them to law enforcement, they would hide. They would hide their pregnancy. They would stop going to their appointments, not just with their substance abuse provider, but also their medical professionals.
Thank you. Representative Yen.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Ms. Fullen. Since you and your providers are some of the closest to these folks that use meth, do you think that there is a risk that if there was a felony charge involved, that they could have a higher possibility of deciding to get an abortion? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Yen, I don't have any studies that would support that. I can only say from my experience, there would certainly be conversations that I personally have had with clients on what their options are. And abortion is one of those options. Not that I bring it up, but that the client brings up, that this is what they are indeed thinking.
Further questions? Representative Craigle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to limit it, but I'm trying to learn, so I apologize. So as I look at this bill, I see a different goal than I think some people see. You know, we read the word felony, right? And we're thinking this bill is intended to put people in jail. I don't see it that way. I see it as a tool for law enforcement around the state to get these women into your arms where they can actually get help. Because right now we don't have the ability to make that happen. This bill would allow that to happen. It would allow us to impose treatment provisions upon the women and get them to the places where they need to be, not stick them in jail. I mean, I don't think that's the point of the bill, but you have to have that. You do have to have that ability, or we're not going to be able to keep them in treatment and get them the help they need. If we don't have that waiting behind them, it's like a lot of these other treatment provisions we put in laws that we already use. They work if we can get the people to where they need to be. And that's what I see the goal. So would you agree with me that if we can get them to you, they're going to have a better chance of success?
Result.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Craigo, I would like to believe that, yes, in fact, that is true, a true and accurate statement. There are significant studies that have come out about forced treatment, mandated treatment. One of the things that we are seeing, though, is where states have these punitive laws, it has the opposite effect. And without having treatment in lieu of incarceration or some type of mechanism, I'm not a lawyer, so please endure my ignorance. But my understanding is that the decision would be a judge through whether sentencing through a plea agreement or discussions with a prosecutor and a defense attorney. There's no guarantee that they would be going into my office or into a community mental health center. So
I don't mean to cut you off, but it's 20 minutes after 1. And like everything in the legislature, we have time constraints. We need to be back on the floor at 2 o'clock. So thank you for your testimony. How many others are planning on testifying on this bill? Yeah, that's what I anticipated. All right. So for the remaining witnesses, I ask that you Keep your comments brief, to the point, and know that there will be others coming up behind you to share their wisdom with the committee as well. So, and committee, keep that in mind as we ask questions. All right, who's next up? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
All right, state your name and who you represent and tell us what we need to know in a brief fashion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be very brief. My name is Andy Somerville. I'm the Executive Director for WAMSAC, which is the Community Mental Health Center organization. And I'm not going to go over anything else that has been discussed, but I do want to make one very important point. So currently, your community mental health centers provide the only residential substance abuse treatment beds in the state for these women. And we call them parenting women beds. They can either be pregnant or bring children with them when they come to these facilities. Currently, we have 21 total in the entire state. We have 4 in Casper, 9 in Rock Springs, and 8 in Sheridan. Currently, as of Monday, when I checked, we have 16 women on the waiting list, which will take them approximately 6 months to enter those programs as we stand now. So of course, our concern, we want to advocate for treatment. However, we'll probably need a lot more resources to potentially meet the need. And that's not a bad thing. We want to meet the need of these women. We want them to come into treatment. These are full programs, wraparound services. They don't leave until, we've talked about employment, parenting, gotten them signed up for any social things that may help them. But to give you an idea, we currently have a proposal to add 12 of those beds in Sheridan. The estimated construction cost to add it to an existing facility on land that's already owned, so no land acquisition, is $681,000. The approximate annual cost to operate that and provide those services is $1.5 million per year. So we do sometimes have opportunities through SAMHSA to get additional funds to fund these beds, but that certainly is our concern. We would want to work with the legislature in making sure that resources were adequate to meet the need. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Somerville. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up. State your name and who you represent and tell us what we need to know.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, quickest highlight reel ever. My name is Lindsay. I represent the Wyoming Counseling Association. We highlight all of the things that our other associations have said as far as mental health providers. We would like to see treatment prioritized. I believe that the reason you're seeing such heartburn about this bill is for us as providers, the language isn't there. Whereas for our prosecuting counterparts, they are understanding where that criminal justice system is stepping in. And so that really is our main concern, that we would like to see treatment prioritized. And I believe I stand for question.
Questions?
How quick was that?
I see none. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
State your name and who you represent. Tell us what we need to know.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Sheila Bush with the Wyoming Medical Society. I actually wasn't going to speak today, but due to the questions around mandatory reporting, I thought it was important that you understand the Medical Society is not taking as strong of a position on this bill as we did the other bill that you likely saw on the other side because of that mandatory reporting piece. The absence of it in this bill allows us to be a little less aggressive, I guess. We would echo the testimony you've heard in terms of prioritizing treatment. We believe as healthcare professionals that that is the right option. But without that mandatory reporting piece, we're a lot less concerned with this bill than we would be if that were amended in or changed in any way. That does change the conversation substantially for us.
Questions? Representative Yen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bush, so I know you're not a doctor, but maybe you can ask a doctor and get them to email me. Do you know if all narcotics have metabolites that pass from parent to child during a pregnancy?
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Bush.
Representative Yin, I'm flattered that you even thought asking me would be something that I could respond to, but I am happy to get you an email. Time me, give me an hour.
Thank you. Any further questions? Appreciate you coming today. Next up. Good afternoon.
Hello, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Josh Hannis with the Wyoming Hospital Association. Much like the Medical Society, we hadn't planned to comment on this bill. But since the question came up around mandatory reporting, that would make a significant difference for us. The evidence does suggest that those types of reporting do dissuade women from seeking prenatal care, and the negative impacts of that are devastating. And I think we'd all agree with that. I also did want to answer a question around, when a pregnant woman comes in, if they're all tested, it's going to vary from facility to facility, but generally it goes something like a woman comes in, they're given a screening. So they're asked a series of questions. Based on those questions, they might decide to test the woman ahead of time, and then upon delivery, test the child. If those are positive, they'll make a call to law enforcement typically. Again, those processes might vary a little bit, but it's going to generally look something like that. I also wanted to point out, just for the committee's information, a number of states have, as it relates to mandatory reporting for pregnant women, either written new laws or changed laws to protect those women from prosecution if they're using. Montana, New Mexico, Colorado, Texas have all done similar things. But with that, I would stand for questions.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming in this afternoon. Next up. Good afternoon. State your name and agency or affiliation for us and tell us what we need to know.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Travis McNevin here on behalf of the Northern Arapaho Business Council. Representative LeBeau testified earlier, and those comments are very much in line with the Northern Arapaho Business Council. In summary, the concern and on opposition to the bill is simply the view that there is more carrot with felony type of thing, and less, more stick with felony and less carrot with potential treatment options. The Native women need to go to Lander and Riverton for most, of course, for hospitals and hospital care. There is concern that more home births, less prenatal treatment, particularly as there is addictions challenges within the population there. And so that is concerning to the Northern Arapaho Business Council. And I will conclude with that.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Do we have anyone in the virtual world waiting to testify? Let's bring somebody in and we'll go back to taking live testimony in a moment.
We have Michelle Faust and Eric McKinney.
Okay, let's start with Ms. Faust.
Okay.
Are you there, Ms. Faust?
She's there. Ms. Faust?
All right, let's go to the next one then.
I'm sorry, I'm here.
Oh, there she is. All right. We're on a bit of a time constraint. Please tell us your name and who you represent, if it's a group or yourself, and then tell us briefly what you want us to hear.
Okay, I am Michelle Faust and I am representing myself. And I am actually the woman in the case Miss Oakley had referred to earlier in 2005 in Lander, Wyoming. And I was the first person under the new law to be charged with felony child endangerment for using while I was pregnant. My case was dismissed through Norman Young's court with the help of Gordon Ellis, my attorney at the time. And my take on this, I stand in opposition as well, due to the fact that I also did not seek prenatal care because mostly out of fear for prosecution. I continued to use while I was pregnant and delivered a baby who tested positive for methamphetamine. But in the brief in my case, it was stated that the law in Wyoming says that a child is birthed to 18 and there's no law against fetal endangerment. I'm not saying that I think it's right or wrong. This has nothing to do with that, but the law is the law and a child is birthed to 18. So my take on this is, if there's going to be a fetal endangerment law, won't that infringe on women's rights? I believe it might be kind of sexist because men can never have enhanced penalties. Men can never become pregnant. And where do we draw the line on fetal endangerment? If I'm pregnant driving my car and undo my seatbelt, I've just endangered my fetus. Roe versus Wade has given women the right to freedom of choice. So are we going to have to revise abortion rights and freedom of choice? And also the doctor-patient confidentiality clause. How do we get around that? I feel like I did not speak to a doctor or anybody who was in a position of authority when I was pregnant out of fear, 100% out of fear. And I believe I'm totally in agreement with the Northern Arapaho Business Council. I think that Fremont County especially has a large number of women who are addicted to methamphetamine. And I believe that unification and keeping families together and strong and pulling people closer is going to be key to success rather than isolating and sending people to prison.
Thank you, Ms. Faust. Any questions from the committee? Representative Yen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Faust, hopefully you heard some of the questions, the same question essentially I'm asking everybody. And as someone who was a user and was pregnant, do you think that felony prosecution increases the likelihood that a woman would get an abortion if they were a meth user? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Faust?
Absolutely, absolutely. Just my own personal opinion. That was a consideration, and I am very blessed to have my son and not have had an abortion, but I was incarcerated a couple of times during my pregnancy. And those are thoughts. I talked to other women in jail at the time that were pregnant, and those ideas are bounced around a lot. And I think that if women weren't, I think if women were going to face severe penalties and be put in prison because they have an addiction problem, I personally believe the chances are higher. I do.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, thank you for testifying today, Ms. Faust. And who else is on the virtual world, Carol?
We have Erin. Erin, I can bring, she said she wants to testify.
What was the name again?
Erin McKinney.
Erin McKinney. Is that Aaron with an E or Aaron with two A's?
It is an E-E-R-I-N.
Aaron McKinney, are you there?
I'll get to you.
Representative Craigo and the stuff that he has mentioned. I also agree with treatment. I don't know that sometimes treatment options can run their limit, and if the carrot doesn't work, then maybe the other side would work. Also, the Ms. Faust, that was a lady that was just on there, I believe, that has said the law is a child from birth to 18. Well, I would say that the law needs to be changed because all of us were a pregnancy at one time. We were inside our mother's womb, and I think all of us were human at that time. I think we're all still human, and we need to recognize that that child is a human. People say, well, it's just a fetus. Well, fetus is the Latin term for, if you Google it, it'll be offspring, little one, baby. Those terms will come up. So I was human when I was in my mother's womb, as you were, and I suppose I still am, hopefully. And I'd like to see that this bill has your support, and not that the treatments would be nullified or anything, but maybe even expanded, because they all need treatment, and we want to see that happen. We want to make sure that this bill goes forward so that we can take further steps. Thank you, sir.
Questions? Thank you for coming in today, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Washit and committee members. I'm Tara Muir. I'm the Public Policy Director with the Wyoming Coalition Against Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. We work on behalf of all the survivors who come to our programs across the state. We help represent them, our programs, and even our civil legal program with attorneys. We talk with victims, hundreds of victims. We do oppose this bill for all the reasons, ditto for the medical reasons, for the mental health reasons, for the substance use disorder reasons. And particularly in our world, when you're a victim of a violent crime, rape, or domestic assault, turning to substances for self-medication if you can't get appropriate mental health care is common. Rape victims are much more susceptible to substance abuse addiction, as are victims of domestic abuse. It's unique with domestic violence survivors because often the abuser will use that addiction and the possibility of incarceration against that victim, which will also shut down any help-seeking behaviors. So we just stand against it today. And any mandatory reporting that might be added, if you're talking about that, we'd have significant concerns if that looped our advocates in at our programs. Women need to come to us for help. We come alongside to help them navigate confusing criminal and substance use disorder treatment seeking, and they need us, and they wouldn't be coming.
Thank you. Questions from Ms. Muir? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Chairman Washit,
Yes.
we do have Aaron back on.
Aaron McKinney.
Hi there, thank you.
Hi there. Please be
Hi.
brief. We're at 1:36. We have to be back on the floor at 2 o'clock. So please state your name and who you represent, yourself or someone else, and then tell us what we need to know briefly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Erin McKinney. I currently am the Director of Women and Children Services at Cheyenne Regional Medical Center, and I also serve as the co-chair of the Perinatal Quality Collaborative through the state of Wyoming. So my professional career, I've been in labor and delivery. I've been on Women and Children's for 20 years. So I have seen on the ground many, many women come in. And what I would really like to say is this is an opportunity when patients disclose that they are either by a screening that I heard Josh talked about, which is what we do, a universal verbal screening for our moms who do it on all patients, is an opportunity that if a patient screens positive, then we can help that mom get into the resources that she needs. I've seen moms who've been through treatment and have had their baby and have gone home with their baby at discharge. And I've also seen moms who have come in without prenatal care and discharged and their babies in protective custody. So I know this is controversial. It's a treatable mental illness. I wanted to also say that as a part of the Perinatal Quality Collaborative, there was an act in 2016, the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act, the CARA Act, went into effect in response to prescription drug and opioid epidemic. This CARA Act requires states to develop and implement monitoring systems for plans of safe care. The focus of the plan of safe care is on public health pathway, not criminal. These, and as others have heard, when moms are the threatened of having it as a criminal outcome, that they're less likely to seek prenatal care. We do know that the evidence says that moms are actually, it's a motivating time for moms to get into their treatment programs. They're motivated for the benefit of their self and their baby. Please know that there is strong progress being done in the state of Wyoming with multidisciplinary stakeholders, with the plans of safe care, engaging pregnant women with substance use disorders to make sure they're in treatment and to mitigate or prevent any negative birth outcomes. For that, I stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions from Ms. McKinney? Seeing none, thank you for testifying today.
Thank you.
Ms. King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Sabrina King. I'm here with the ACLU of Wyoming. I will try to be brief. I know that your time is limited. What I want to say, and I really don't want to repeat what other folks have said other than to back up what they've said with a little bit of evidence, and also to say that there have been some questions about, we need to take care of the mother, but what happens if, what happens if the mother continues to use? In the case of when they continue to use, what are the options? And we need to have that carrot. But the reality is, as you heard before, other states that have gone down that path, the evidence in all of the studies have shown that it is actually worse for the baby because women do not seek treatment, and many of those states are starting to back away from this exact policy. I also want you to know that there are 19 states that have either created or funding drug treatment programs specifically targeted to those who are pregnant. 17 states in DC provide pregnant women with priority access to state-funded treatment programs. 10 states prohibit publicly funded drug treatment programs from discriminating against pregnant women. It's entirely possible to take a mid-step in actually dealing with this issue. What this bill does is it jumps straight to criminalization. So this question of, well, what if, the intermediary steps don't work? We don't have those intermediary steps. There's plenty that we could put in state law that would actually encourage women to get treatment when they're pregnant. If all we are doing is saying, if you are using while you are pregnant, you are going to be charged with a crime, you are going to spend 5 years in jail and get a $5,000 fine, women are not going to seek treatment. It's not going to happen. And all of the evidence backs that up. So I think it is entirely possible if we were to take a little bit more time on this issue, we could find a middle ground and we could actually look at the 19 other states that have done something different and look at why other states are backing away from criminalizing use during pregnancy and find a solution that will actually result in what I think is the hoped outcome for this, which is better outcomes for the baby. That isn't going to happen under this bill. So certainly hope that you vote it down today and we can take some time to actually find the right solution. So thank you. And I would stand for any questions.
Questions from Ms. King? Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. King, someone mentioned earlier that they had concerns about that this impacts women only and that it's a gendered law. Does the ACLU have a position or concerns about this being specific towards people who can get pregnant and not with other sexes or genders?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Provenza. I mean, we're certainly looking at only one side of the equation, right? So what if the father is using? You certainly have questions around that. I don't know that we have a specific position on how to address that issue, but either way, regardless, when you were talking about a child and you're talking about the implications of, whether or not that child is going to have a parent who's using for either of those parents, really the priority should be treatment. But I think in this specific case, if we're talking about women, I think the implications are, that those women while they are pregnant are not going to seek treatment, which has direct implications when the baby is actually born.
All right, it's 1:42. I'm going to close public comment. I appreciate your testifying today, Ms. King. Committee, what is your preference? Move the bill by Representative Crago. Do I have a second? Second by Representative Rodriguez-Williams. Discussion. Committee, anybody? Representative Yen?
Mr. Chairman, are we doing amendments or only discussion right now?
Excuse me?
Are we doing amendments or only discussion?
If you have an amendment, bring it.
Mr. Chairman, so I don't know if this is the same as what Representative Crago may be considering, but I'd like to add knowingly after while on page 2, line 1.
Carol, do you have that?
No, I did not. Page 2,
Repeat.
line 1, add what?
Knowingly, the word knowingly, which is the same word at the end of the line, but also added after the word while.
Wow, thank you.
Representative Crago, knowingly.
No comment, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have a second on the amendment? Seconded by Provenza. Discussion on the amendment. All right, we'll take a vote on the amendment to add the word knowingly on page 2, line 1. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. No. That amendment has failed. Representative Yen.
Mr. Chairman, so I will do another amendment and I will explain this amendment if I get a second. So I would like to strike at after methamphetamine on line 2 through line 4.
Is there a second to Representative Yen's motion to strike after the word methamphetamine on line 2 through the end of line 4? Is there a second? Second by Provenza. You want to describe your amendment, Representative Yen?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So, I think part of the intent of this, and maybe the good bringer of the bill can tell me to make sure, is that we want to kind of equalize this with how we treat kids and parents, right? So in 64405, it's specifically about a felony for parents who give their kids meth. Doesn't refer to any other drug. We actually do also outlaw giving kids any illegal drugs, and it's a misdemeanor under 64403 B. Romanet 4. So sell, give, or otherwise furnish a child any drug prohibited by law without a physician's prescription. That's only a misdemeanor. So this specific bill kind of makes it unequal, right? So a pregnant person is a felon if they ingest an illegal drug, but if they give a kid an illegal drug, it's only a misdemeanor. So I'm striking it just so we don't have that unequalness between a pregnant person and a parent of a child. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion on the amendment? Representative Wanser.
Thanks. And Representative Yin didn't mention it, but A and B in 64405 are specific to methamphetamine, not any other Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 or narcotic drugs. So it would seem to fit in the statute a lot better if we just keep with methamphetamine. And he didn't make that point, but I thought that's important.
Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I missed some things, and this was certainly one of them. That we did the discussion about not including marijuana, but more specifically and more correctly, this phrase methamphetamine or a controlled substance classified in Schedule 1 or 2 that is a narcotic drug is something that's in our statutes. In other places, it's in possession, so which is 35-7, 1031. And there's like an enhancement for these, for like the delivery of these type of drugs. So this idea of methamphetamine or these narcotic Schedule 1 or 2 is in our statutes in other places, again, possession, and specifically in this felony child endangering, which is why it was placed there to actually have that continuity. And then as far as going to the misdemeanor, I mean, just that I'm not sure what you're getting at. That's just a different statute, but this specifically that has that is what makes it a felony. And I would add that in that felony, actually just being in a room with a child in methamphetamine is a felony. And again, I certainly argue that ingesting it has more dangerous effects.
Thank you. Further comment? Representative Wanser.
So I agree with all that, but again, in A and B and 64405, it's just methamphetamine. So is a correct response to add Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 narcotics in A and B and the rest of the title? Because I do think, regardless of everybody else's feelings on the bill, that is kind of an interesting non sequitur to add this and C and not have it conform. So I guess my question would be for Representative Oakley if she wants to add it into A and B as well.
Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would agree that would even make my argument better there, my discussion, right? As far as the continuity, that would certainly do that. And I would agree that we could take care of that cleanup now. Yes, Representative.
We're joined by our chairman. Would you like to assume the chair, sir? Very good, very good. All right. Further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman, I'll withdraw my amendment if there's going to be a different one.
Is that
The
okay?
amendment's
Sure.
withdrawn?
And then, Mr. Chairman, if I would to make the amendment to add, and it's in 64405 A and B, which you don't see in front of you in the bill, but after the words methamphetamine to add, or a controlled substance classified in Schedule 1 or 2 that is a narcotic drug. And as previously mentioned in A and B, deals with absorption, inhalation, ingestion of methamphetamine, as well as having no person having the care or custody of a child shall knowingly and willfully permit the child to remain in a room, dwelling, or vehicle where methamphetamine and then, or any other Schedule I or Schedule II narcotic would be present.
I'm seeing a look of distress on Carl's face, so
I'd be happy to.
brief after. So I think the amendment summary is that in sections A and B of 64405, which are not visible on the bill, you would then, where they end with the word methamphetamine, you would then add the remaining language on lines 2, 3, and 4 of this statute, or this proposed amendment to 64405. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, with a little bit of LSO wordsmithing, which I'm sure they would do.
Further discussion on the amendment? Representative Yan.
Mr. Chairman, so just to make it clear, this would, in addition to what we have in the bill, where a pregnant person would be a felon if they consume methamphetamine or a Schedule I or II narcotic, in the other parts where it's a child that exists outside of the parent and the parent, we are now also making them a felon if they give them a narcotic drug as well.
All right, further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of Representative Wannister's amendment to include the language or controlled substance classified in Schedule I or II to sections A and B of 64405, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. No. Going to need a show of hands. All those in favor, raise your hands, please. 4, and all those opposed. Looks like that fails. That amendment fails. Further amendments. Discussion. Discussion on the bill, Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to say something. There's been so much discussion, and I certainly that it perhaps have been remiss in not making this clearer by saying everybody said there's the no way to look at treatment options. Actually, by law, there was discussion about sentencing when somebody goes in front of either a misdemeanor or a felony judge, but during sentencing, a judge has to consider probation first by law, has to go through findings. And so the only way somebody would go, or even in a felony, would get incarceration first would be the judge making findings about the facts in that person. And it just clearly isn't going to be here. So actually, some of this discussion that it needs to be in law, in that way, it is. The criminal justice system says to a judge, and that, yes, you have to consider probation first. It is considered first. It would be considered first. And treatment would be the first order of business. And so in that way, it is in statute.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I keep hearing about probation. We're just going to put them on probation. My understanding is that the Department of Corrections has many people there because of probation violations or parole violations. So it's not just we're going to put them on probation. It's if they mess up, we could just send them off to DOC. That's not necessarily helpful. Sometimes trying to rehabilitate takes time, takes services, and it's just not an accurate statement to say just putting them on probation is all that's going to happen. Don't worry about it. No one's going to get 5 years. And it's particularly concerning because, we have enough evidence. There were 4.6 million births in 8 states between 2003 and 2014. And we found that more infants are born experiencing drug withdrawal in states with policies that punish pregnant women for substance use. This policy is ineffective. It has detrimental outcomes. And this is a public health problem, not a criminal problem. We need to address the core issue. And so I would advise this committee to vote against this bill. And just talking about the evidence, and let's look at how we can actually combat the real issue here. Let's, instead of putting in a policy that is, been told is pro-life, it really isn't. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Carol, we're out of time. It's 1:55. Carol, you want to call the roll on House Bill 85?
Representative Craigo,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Oakley,
Aye.
Representative Provenza,
No.
Representative Rodriguez Williams,
Aye.
Representative Yen,
No.
Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman Olson,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Washit.
Aye.
7 ayes, 2 noes. Do pass.
So 7-3, House Bill 85 has passed. Will be forwarded to the body. Thank you all. Appreciate your testimony today.